All right, everybody, really jacked and tan to bring in ESPN, SEC Network, and great friend of the show. Actually, the third guy I ever had on the old show before he came to the Daily Wire. True day one, my good friend Chris Doering.
I feel like I got in on an IPO early.
Yeah, you did.
I saw some potential there. I loaded up on it.
Well, Chris, man, I mean, without Chris, he talked me up to everybody, man. I was able to get other guests on, so he was. I do. Your check's still in the mail. I'm working on it, the way the economy is right now.
It's great to see your success, man. Proud of all you guys.
Thank you, man.
Happy to be here with you.
Definitely, man. Well, I want to hop right into it. Obviously, when we're recording this, Florida, Billy Napier's here today. He's caught in a little heat, about different things, but I'm looking at it, CD, and I really wonder if people know where that roster was that he inherited. I mean, AR-15, or excuse me, Anthony Richardson is really talented, but it's just shocking to see the roster that he inherited at Florida.
Yeah, all right. So I'm a lifelong Gator fan, the son of two Florida grads, lived in Gainesville growing up. So I feel like I can say this, but our fan base has become the worst, in terms of criticism, in terms of lack of patience. The guy hadn't even coached the game yet, and his popularity has been up and down, mostly because of the recruiting criticism that he's gotten. So, that's ultimately what cost Dan Mullen his job. But you're right. I don't think people really understood the disarray that the program was in, the lack of elite SEC talent on that roster. So I hope Florida fans understand where they are right now and how difficult the schedule is this year. I think if Florida can go 8-4, given the schedule they have to face, that should be viewed as a successful season.
I think it should too. And the point we made on the show the other day is that when you take over a job in recruiting, that first recruiting class is the toughest because you haven't cultivated those relationships that Georgia has. You haven't cultivated the relationships that Tennessee has, or even a new guy, Shane Beamer, going into year 2 has even been able to cultivate. So I really look at that class, like for Brian Harsin, for example. This class, to me, is one that you can judge him on. Yeah. Now, it's only a year and a half, 2 years. But that's a whole heck of a lot better than being thrown in there and you're going to try and reach. But what, you talked about 8-4 and looking at kind of the identity of who Billy is and that, what Florida can be and the potential of it. What type of identity do you think Florida's going to have under Coach Napier?
Well, I think you look at the resume. One thing that has the fan base excited, he's in the Nick Saban tree, he's in the Dabo Swinney tree. He was patient in terms of taking that job. He didn't jump at the first job, so he was very thoughtful on where he wanted to end up and the opportunity that existed at the University of Florida. He's gotten the full support of Scott Strickland and the athletic department in terms of open up the checkbook, the way he's built a staff around him that resembles what Georgia and what Alabama has. The football facility opens here in the next couple weeks, so that's exciting to be able to recruit on the same level as some of the other teams in this conference and across the country. But I think the biggest thing that I look at in terms of an identity, they have to get back to being the flagship university of the state of Florida. And you look at the struggles that Florida State, Florida, and Miami have had, it's directly because of what you talked about, the relationships that Alabama has within the state, what Georgia has within the state, Clemson. The top talent is leaving the state of Florida, which was never even a possibility when I was a kid. You wanted to play in the state. Now they have to do a good job of making that the destination of choice for the top players in the state of Florida.
Yeah, Billy's been in more trees than an owl.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about the Florida-Georgia rivalry. All of the guys I talked to who used to play in that game say that needs to be held in Gainesville and Athens. I know that game means a lot to Jacksonville.
I would be disappointed. I'm one of the few people that can actually speak to this from a firsthand perspective, right? When I was at Florida, the Gator Bowl at the time was being renovated for the Jags. So I got a chance to play 2 times in Jacksonville. I played once in Gainesville and once in Athens.
Okay.
It's awesome. But what it is just another home game whenever you have it there. For those, you guys have all been to the cocktail party, I assume?
Yes. Yeah.
The visuals, the red and black,
it's cool.
Blue.
It's cool.
80,000 people in the stadium, another 100 in attendance just to be a part of it. Like, it's special. The fact that there's a Florida-Georgia Hall of Fame dedicated to just that game speaks to what it means. So I understand what Kirby says in terms of missing out on another opportunity to bring recruits in. But one of the things that we need to focus on as college football fans, but the SEC as well, is retaining tradition. And I think with as much as changing with the NIL stuff and the transfer portal and the fact that conferences are realigning, hanging on to some of the history that's made this conference so good and so important is really, I think, a priority.
Well, I agree. I've been there and I've had great times at that game. But something that Jake always talks about is how college football means so much to these smaller communities. I mean, Alabama Auburn used to be played in Birmingham,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that game is now a home and home in Tuscaloosa and Auburn. So, I mean, you don't think that Athens and Gainesville need that game more than, say, a bigger city like Jacksonville?
I mean, you can look at it that perspective. I mean, the pandemic year crushed businesses in the Southeast. You know, not having the crowds come, not having the hotel stays, the restaurants. I understand where you're coming from that perspective, but if they were ever to change it, it certainly wouldn't be because they want to be kind to the communities. It'd be the opportunity that they could have from being able to use another home game for recruiting.
I was thinking a cool way could be to rotate it in to keep that tradition, but it's maybe like twice a decade. And then you still, if you go to Georgia, you get to play that game in Athens one time or Gainesville.
Yeah, well, I don't have as much of a problem as Florida and Georgia playing in Jacksonville as I do in some of these early non-conference big matchups being played in cities that aren't. That, to me, that I don't like that. I don't like the neutral site early in the year. I like going. We look in, and I love Atlanta and the Chick-fil-A pizza, all that stuff. That's cool, but I'm fine with Florida and Georgia in conference playing it in Jacksonville. But these early games where we're seeing other teams meet up, FSU's going to play LSU in the Superdome. That's a de facto home game for me.
That I think about it, most of the guys I'm talking to who gave me that opinion are Georgia guys who think it's just a home game for Florida.
That's
thinking
exactly
like Brandon Boykin, right?
We should ask Pollock that.
And Justin Houston. They're like, that's a home game for Florida.
That's exactly.
I'm older than all those guys. Growing up in the 80s when Georgia used to beat the hell out of us, they never said anything about it. Only when we started owning it.
That's exactly.
Y'all really have, man.
I love it. Hey, Anthony Richardson. We put our top 5 quarterbacks out the other day. What type of season do you expect Anthony Richardson to have this year?
I think that's one of the biggest unknowns, really, to be honest with you. And I think that's why you think about Florida having such a potentially high ceiling to low floor is because they're going to go as their quarterback takes them. And I'm not saying anything overly bold right there because I think quarterback play is of the utmost importance in football these days. But Anthony Richardson has got to be more consistent. When I say consistent, he's got to be consistent in throwing the football with greater accuracy. He's got to be more consistent in executing the play and going through his reads as he's supposed to. And he's got to be consistently in the lineup. He's been so injury prone that they can't afford to have him out of there because of what he brings with his athleticism, size, and arm strength.
I was going to, another thing, Spencer Rattler. This has been the talk of the town here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
You go from a Lincoln Riley system where you did get benched for Caleb Williams, and Lincoln Riley's one thing he can do is coach quarterbacks. We've seen that with the past quarterbacks they had. Is Spencer Rattler going to all of a sudden go to South Carolina and just be fixed and everything's going to be perfect?
I don't know. Was there a ton of deficiencies though? I mean, I think if you go back and look, his completion percentage was still really high. I think you had some games where it didn't necessarily win you the games, but I don't think he was losing you the games either. And I think for South Carolina to get a guy like Spencer Rattler, when he put his name in the transfer portal, who would have thought he was going to end up in Columbia?
Sure.
So what it does is a couple things. It immediately gives a legitimate quarterback to South Carolina, where they went through 4 different guys last year. But it also shows that Columbia, South Carolina is a true destination of choice for guys that are putting their names into the transfer portal in the future and for high school recruits. I mean, this is a great illustration of just how good Shane Beamer is at creating relationships and maintaining those. The fact that he was on that staff when they were recruiting Spencer out of high school and still kept a good enough relationship to bring him to South Carolina is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I just I'm very excited to see it. I think after Bryce Young, when you look at the quarterbacks in the SEC, I mean, you can make an argument for a lot of guys going 2 through 8. To be honest,
that's the storyline this year, right? Is the experience at the quarterback position in this conference, and usually when you have that kind of experience returning, you have the offense having the edge. So I would anticipate this being a fun season for those that like points being scored.
Yeah, I think Georgia's a great example of that, and they made some add-ons in the offseason, Jermaine Burton coming over, but kind of taking a more 30,000-foot view, CD. Obviously, the SEC, you're going to talk about Alabama and Georgia. We've asked everybody this. Give me a team or maybe a couple teams outside of Alabama and Georgia that you kind of got circled that could maybe make that jump a little bit.
That's been the conversation of choice around here this week is who's the third best team in the SEC, right? Everybody has a different answer, but for me, it's Kentucky. I look at Kentucky as a team that has just slowly been building, and I know there's some losses on the offensive line and on the front seven, but I honestly believe in Coach Stoops. I think they have the quarterback that they haven't had before with Will Levis. The fact that he got here last year right before fall camp and didn't have a spring and summer and still played as well as he did is pretty amazing. So now having the spring to go through Rich Scandrello's office and being able, offense and being able to have the time in the summer with his guys, I just think they take a step forward in a league where on the division on the East, there's a lot of unclarity and teams fighting for that spot. So I actually, how sometimes we do these shows and you may think something and then when you're doing it live, you make a prediction. I made the prediction today that Kentucky was going to beat Georgia on November 19th in Lexington. So you're with me?
You think that?
I had Georgia losing on the road at Kentucky.
Oh, you did? That's right. That's right.
But I'll say this, though. Like the thing about, and I experienced this at Florida, sometimes you have to be in situations and fail to know how to handle them in the future. So Kentucky was never in any meaningful November games until the last few years. They have lost some big games against the Bulldogs in the last couple seasons, but I think those experiences are going to help them this year. And I don't know if there was a better home field crowd in back-to-back weeks than that Florida LSU back-to-back weekend in Lexington last year. Those fans are passionate about football.
What if I were to tell you Mark Stoops was the best coach in Lexington and I didn't think it was close?
I mean, I think you'd probably be of the opinion of the majority of people right now, with as down as they are.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, again, Mark Stoops, I've said it a million times, he does more with less than anybody, and I haven't seen anybody do less with more than John Calipari.
Well, he's doing more with less, but now they're starting to get better players.
That's
too.
Exactly right.
And I think I made this statement to Will Levis. We had him on a little earlier today. He mentioned something about his girlfriend, and I said, with you being the most popular guy in the state of Kentucky, which who would have ever thought a football player was going to be the most popular guy?
Right.
I asked if he was, still had the same girlfriend or not. He said he was. So I give him credit for being able to resist the temptation.
Yeah, we have 4 different picks for the number 3 team in the SEC this season. I have Texas A&M. You have Tennessee, right?
I have Arkansas.
Kentucky.
Yeah, I think you could make an argument for all of those those 4 different teams.
As a Florida guy, I'm sure it doesn't pain you to see Miami and Florida State be down recently. Mario Cristobal comes into Miami. It looks like he's doing well on the recruiting trail. They at least have a future. They have a vision for the future. Florida State, I don't know, not so much right now. What are your thoughts on what that program needs to do to get back to the dominance of the late 90s during the Chris Winkie era, and even when Jimbo Fisher was there?
Yeah, I think the plan is the same for Florida State, and Miami. It's find a way to keep that top talent in the state. Florida State's drop off from what they were to where they are now, it's pretty precipitous, and they don't necessarily have the same financial means that Florida does, and especially after having your buyout coaches contracts here recently the way they have. So they don't have the ability to move on from Mike Norvell. Now they've got to find a way to make this work. But it starts with making Florida State one of those destinations where the talent wants to end up from the state of Florida and not leaving to go to some of those other schools we talked about.
Well, last question. I want you to look into your crystal ball and tell me, and again, if you don't want to make the prediction now, I totally get it. But who do you think are the 4 teams that make the playoff this year?
You know what's funny? I haven't even really put much thought into that yet. So I'm sure that I'll be on your show. I hope to be on your show during the season or when we get closer. But I'll reserve that. Who you got?
I got Bama. I got Georgia. I'm kind of going back and forth on the other 2, man. I really like Oklahoma and Brent Venables. Dylan Gabriel, who's worked with Lebby before. I don't think Lebby gets enough credit for the offense at Ole Miss.
That's an interesting conversation that I don't think we've had enough this week. Is like, who's the most important coordinator that's lost this year that's going to be the toughest to replace? I think Lebby could be that guy.
People
Mike Elko at Texas A&M's another one.
DJ Durkin at Ole Miss too. Speaking about that same staff going to A&M.
Yeah. So I think I agree with you in terms of the impact of losing Jeff Lebby. I'll say this: I don't know what my 4 is, but I do believe, and I was criticized a lot last year. I didn't think Alabama was an elite team. I thought that was the best coaching job that Nick Saban has ever done.
I agree with you 100%.
Squeezing more out of less and filling holes that were there on the offensive line. It looked like he was using duct tape to keep that thing together. But I really believe that they are the best team in the country this year. They have an elite defense. And I can't ever think about a time where you've had the best offensive and best defensive player in college football on the same team.
It's nuts. I mean, the four I got Georgia, I got Alabama. I'll throw Oklahoma in there and give me
You
Ohio
have the
State.
Buckeyes, yeah.
Yeah, I think Bama plays Ohio State in the Natty. I think Stroud wins the Heisman.
I
Bama
like
wins the Natty.
both of those picks, to be honest, as much as it pains me as a Michigan guy to say.
I know. And who is that? What's the name of that school?
They're Ohio.
They're
They're Ohio, and I'm going to say a lot of different things come Thanksgiving time. But
Okay.
right now,
Well,
we
now
can,
I'm gonna get you.
right now we can
slip
be
up.
rational right now.
I'm going to figure out a way to
we'll
Leo
find
DiCaprio you in Inception to get you to say it. I'll figure it out. But CD, it's always great to
great to
have
be with you
on,
guys,
brother.
man. Again,
I appreciate it.
Love watching y'all.
Appreciate
and,
Thanks a lot, man.
Congratulations.
Well,
on
shoot,
success,
it's the same here, man. And of course, we're going to get you back on. I really appreciate it. And I'd really appreciate if you hit that like and subscribe button.